Let's start. Turn it down harder and start up. It's draft week, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with Bob Rose, the sleep-deprived Bob Rose, who will be glad when it's finally Sunday because he can finally get back to sleeping and writing just one article or two articles a week instead of one every day. How you doing tonight, Bob?
You pretty much summed it up in a heartbeat. Only increase that production. During most of the year, I usually average one a day. Which is our expectations, and that's okay. This time of year, expectations are 4 to 5, from our network and per day, and I'm usually doing 2 or 3 of those. As you know, from knowing me these last few years, you and Sean, I have a whole notebook full of draft notes and draft prospects that I have been looking at since January. So people that think that this job, it's really tough on the media for a week or a week and a half. No, folks, this is 6 weeks of pedal to the metal work. And you can ask Mike Detillier, 6 months or more, of scouting. So I will be extremely glad, when this weekend gets through.
Yeah, you feel like a scout yourself because of so much film you're looking at and so many decisions you have to make as far as what players to cover. And it's kind of like how the draft itself has become. I mean, my first draft I ever watched was in 1988 when they took Craig Hayward in the first round. Prior to that, I didn't really watch the draft because, I mean, I didn't think. I thought it would just be names getting called out and that kind of stuff, and that's kind of how ESPN back then with that. But it's become such an industry now. And free agency, of course, has fed that even more because it's not just the draft. You can fix your team. It's now free agency. So you see how much it's grown since then. And I can remember watching the first couple rounds of the draft, and the only drama really was when the Jets were on the clock and the Giants were on the clock and the Jets fans were losing their shit over the picks, But other than that, I mean, the rest of the time, it was guys in the peanut gallery, and it was not owners, but scouts and player personnel people sitting in the I guess the orchestra pit is the best way I could put it. And Pete Rozelle would come up and call out a name and, that kind of stuff. And you'd see these guys with helmet phones, talking to the phones and, running a card up. And that was about it. And the announcers really just, if they were lucky, they had profiles. The players weren't even there.
Yeah.
The number one overall pick's not even there. You didn't really even see this guy until they showed up at the facility for media day, which happened that afternoon. So the draft is so different now. You've got 50 players or 30. No, they got more than 30 because they got enough for every possible first round pick. But you get like 50 players sitting out there, and some of them I feel bad for.
Yeah.
The slide. Aaron Rodgers slide, and we'll talk about Aaron Rodgers in a second. But Aaron Rodgers slide, that was probably one of the most famous ones
Mm-hmm.
because he was predicted to go, number one or number two overall, and here he does. He slides, and this is the thing about these players, once a guy passes all the quarterback needy teams, then that's where the real free fall comes, and you're like, going, okay, so what team's going to take him? Is he going to actually hang around to the second round? So
Yeah.
that was one of the big drama moments, I guess, of the draft. When was your first draft you ever saw?
Oh gosh, I mean, I tune in for bits and pieces. You and I are about the same age, so I got to believe that the first draft that I really sat down and paid attention to, would be in the late '80s. And of course, back then they did everything, which was 12 rounds, all in one day. They started in the morning, and they wrapped up late, or like pushing midnight or into the wee hours of the morning. Those are the drafts I remember, and it was, if you're a football purist, those ones were more entertaining to watch. Especially if you tuned in for the duration, because you'd see the analysts once we got into the '90s and ESPN started to expand their coverage. You'd see them just absolutely exhausted. I think you pointed this out on the show last week. You would see actual critiquing, of the picks. Kuiper, Theismann, other guys would talk about, I can't see the fit for this player in this organization, and things like that. And of course, you have the famous Mel Kiper, Jim Harbaugh. Situation. There were a lot of entertaining things like that over the years. Now it's just a network TV spectacle, and you lose a lot of that football stuff. I would, in a perfect world, I would rather a perfect marriage between the two. I would like it back in New York because, like you said, Jets fans and Giants fans, they travel to these drafts too. But it was so much more entertaining when it was in New York. But I mean, the draft is just a fun thing, period. I call it Christmas in April, for NFL teams and NFL fans. And in large part, that's what it is. You can always look back 3 or 4 years later. If you yourself, like you and I are, if you yourself were an analyst, have been an analyst, you can look back and say, "Oh wow, was I wrong on this guy?" Or if I knew I had it dead on, that kind of thing. Those are always fun things to do, especially when you do have a job in media.
Yeah, I was going to say when we're talking about draft analysts getting things wrong, the Dr. Z was one of the first analysts they brought on there, and he famously, or now infamously, sat and watched the '83 draft and was commenting on that. And Dan Marino slides all the way to the Dolphins, and he infamously said, I don't understand where this great coach is going to come from to make Dan Marino a good quarterback, and it's because of Don Shula's reputation at the time was, we're going to pound the ball. The quarterback just basically hands the ball off because that's what Bob Greasy did. And to an extent, that's what David Woodley was supposed to do. And, 82, the Dolphins are the AFC champions. You watch that Super Bowl, and that Dolphins team got to the Super Bowl basically. Strike helped, but they were a defensive team that ran the football, and Woodley ran the ball. And then you would pull and put Don Strock in later on. But if you needed a pass, but basically that was the Dolphins' mindset. So the last thing you would have thought is Don Shula changes and it becomes Air Schuler. That just didn't happen. That no one could foresee that. So that's great drama to go back and see that. And about 5 years ago now, time goes by so fast. But they had NFL Network did a series of specials called Carton of Draft, and it talked about each big draft years
Yeah.
and how the draft changed. And, they did talk about the 83 draft, but they talk about the 74 draft when Steelers got 4 Hall of Famers. When the Dirty Dozen of the Cowboys, which I think was the 75 draft, where they got 12 players who made the roster and started off with Randy White. But I mean, they built their team Doomsday 2 defense out of that draft class that got them to the Super Bowl in 77 and won the championship, got to them the Super Bowl in 78. And probably if they don't get injured, they probably go back to the Super Bowl in 79. Staubach got hurt. That was Staubach's last year.
Yep.
And it led to the next 3 NFC Championship appearances by the Cowboys, 81 to 83. So yeah, I mean, it was fascinating to watch this because you can see the evolution of the draft from a guy standing in basically this small room, like a hotel ballroom, to Madison Square Garden, to this huge event that it is today with the stage and all the show and Anna and I can think about a few years ago. Yeah, who's got the saddest story? Can we have one first-round pick that has a mom and a dad in the picture, and the dad's not in jail, or the parents aren't shot, or whatever? So yeah, yeah, Calvin, absolutely. The whole the twins that ended up going to Seattle. One had no hand. That story. I must have seen that story about 1,000 times on that Sunday. And it was the case that the draft was all in one day, 12 rounds. And then they broke it up into 2 days. And by the end, it was like the Jerry Lewis telethon. I mean, he's got the bow tie all undone. He's exhausted. So I remember those days, and it's now just so much showmanship. Real quick. So I know you're going to be doing, starting Thursday night, you're going to be doing every night of the draft, a live broadcast with the Bayou Blitz. That's going to be on YouTube. Anyone can find that. How would they find that stuff?
And thank you. We're going to be streaming it through the Saints News Network page, also on the Saints News Network Twitter page at Saints News. We'll be streaming it through Facebook, the Bayou Blitz page, as well as the Bayou Blitz Twitter page at Bayou Blitz Pod. If you do subscribe to either channel on YouTube, which you can, Saints News Network and Bayou Blitz, you can tune into the YouTube, go straight to the YouTube coverage too. But folks, we need money. I'm not asking for money, but we need subscribers. So click that subscribe button, click that follow button on Twitter. Click us all, myself, Brendan Boyle, and John Hendricks, Kyle T. Mosley, Ross Jackson. We're all on Facebook. We're all on Twitter. Give us a hand and help us follow that as well. But we're. Brendan and I have not finalized what time we're going on air on Thursday or Friday yet, on any of the 3 days yet. My best guess right now is about a half hour, maybe 40 minutes or so before the first pick is made on each day. But I'll announce that probably tomorrow afternoon. But folks, you can tune in and out. Alan, I'm hoping you'll still be able to join us, or at least to the extent that you're popping in and out. We'll Absolutely. Have John Hendricks and Ross Jackson live from the facility, from the Saints facility. Kyle is going to pop in and out, from Houston. He's been doing a great job with HBCU prospects. So he'll be able to give some insight, especially as we get into day 2 and day 3 on some of those picks. And if you've been following me, I have exhausted my eyes and my brains doing offensive player profiles. I have a notebook full of defensive players too, but Ross has been taking the defensive profile publishings, for our piece. So I'm hoping to be prepared. But folks, my best guess is this. I have notes on literally 87 players and counting. If I'm lucky, the Saints will draft one. One. But I mean, we'll be able to chime in on every single pick. The first round and most of the second day is always fun for Brendan and I too, because we'll talk about each team's needs coming up, what players could be a fit there, what players are still on the board as the Saints pick approaches. So it's not just tuning into some people 5 minutes before your favorite team picks, for a quick synopsis. We try to give you analysis through the whole process.
And Bob's DMs will be open, so if anyone wants to make a quick check deposit, he likes checks, may not the cash.
I do.
And I wanted to get that out there because I want people to follow. I want people to get on the show and watch you guys do this stuff because like we had said right before that, ESPN and especially NFL Network has become like the Oscars almost, or the Tony Awards. It's not really football anymore. It's more of a show. And these players are more like guys coming out to the red carpet.
Yeah.
It's not that dry analysis anymore where you still get the film footage and the great music in the background. They show some things, but you don't get that criticism. You don't get that critique of why they getting this guy. You're not getting that who the hell is Mel Kiper moment where he is losing his shit because they're going to go with Jim Harbaugh and passing on Trent Dilfer. When the Jets take a tight end instead of taking a defensive lineman or a quarterback or whatever it is, you don't get that instant analysis. Well, this is why the Jets are always picking in the top 5 because they just don't understand how the draft works. You don't get that anymore. They've told these guys to tone it down, and they do. There's so much more focus on, like Calvin was talking about, the guy is a blind kid and a 3-legged dog with heartworms. I mean, that's what the stories are now.
Yeah.
So it's really a shame because that's the part I miss. I'm the I don't want to say the hard-hitting critiques, but I just miss that, someone really disagreeing, and just explaining why he disagrees and really picking on a franchise because some franchises deserve to be mocked. I'll be honest with you. They make bad decisions constantly. So they deserve that mocking. And I'll even say sometimes the Saints deserve to be mocked. 2 years ago, we took a defensive end, Peyton Turner, who most people had graded a low second, third round pick. You took him in the first round. It wasn't a need so much as it was really trying to replace the guy that you couldn't afford, Trey Hendrickson. And he has not done anything as a Saint. He has spent more time on the inactive list than he has as a starter. And what are the biggest needs the Saints have right now? Defensive end. With Peyton Turner, this should be his prime year. This should be his breakout season. And it looks like he's going to be probably the biggest bust this team has had since probably Jonathan Sullivan. And Jonathan Sullivan cost 2 first-round picks.
It's trending that direction. And I'm trying my best to play devil's advocate here. I'm pointing out to people, Turner's coming into his third year. Ruiz, the light really came on for him in year 3. But It is tough because, and we talked about it a couple of times this offseason so far when addressing draft needs. The real red flag for me, I get the injury frustration. We had it with Davenport too. So I understand that part. But when a player that's a former first round pick is a healthy scratch for the last 2 games of your regular season, that to me is a huge, huge red flag going into this offseason. And I've told a couple different people, I'm like, and again, trying to play devil's advocate, maybe we will find out. Maybe we will see that the Saints coaches like Turner more than the fans do. And if they don't address edge rusher or defensive end in the first 2 or 3 rounds, that tells us that they have some confidence in Turner. But I don't see that being the case. And I remember that was Brendan still jokes with me about this. That was one of our infamous live draft moments, because at the time I was so positive that the Saints were going to draft a cornerback because that was their biggest area of need, in my view. I did 15 individual draft profiles on the cornerback position. There were still some very good ones on the board when Turner was picked. And I literally papers went flying when the Peyton Turner pick was announced. And then, of course, when they did draft the cornerback Paulson Adebo, guess what? That wasn't one of the 15 players that Bob Rose had painstakingly did a profile on. So none of us are draft experts here. Facebook, you're full of draft experts, and I love some of you. But I'm waiting for you to screenshot that check that you're going to get for being a front office executive. None of us know. And that's one of the entertaining things about the draft period that still exists.
I got to look it up right now. I'm trying to see. I think this is the draft. Let's see. I'm trying to see. This was the draft where I had the Saints taking a corner. Because I think this is the one I was on. I was actually on the Carolina Panthers podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, this is the one. And I said, Greg Newsome is going to be the pick.
Yes, same here.
That was the cornerback. Greg Newsome was going to be the pick. And the Cleveland Browns took him. So I think the next player I had marked down was either the cornerback Tyson Campbell.
Yep, that was my second too.
Yeah, or I had a wide receiver, and I do not remember. I'm looking through the draft right now. Golly, Asante Samuel went in the 2nd round.
Yeah.
And we took Peyton friggin' Turner.
Yeah.
There was a wide receiver I had too, and I do not remember who he was that I had us picking. And yeah, I'm just looking through this. I don't remember who it was now, but that's okay. But yeah, I said when Newsome went off the board, I said, well, the Saints are going to be in a bit of a problem because the next cornerback I had rated up there was Tyson Campbell from Georgia.
I had Campbell and Asante. I would have been happy with either one of them at that point.
Yeah.
Bit of a stretch, but I would have been happy.
It might have been Elijah Moore. I don't remember which receiver I had on there. I'm just looking at the draft again. But, when they took Peyton Turner, I just got finished talking about this wide receiver, and while I was talking, they made the pick, and he says, and Tony says, the host for Carolina Panthers podcast says, well, the Saints took a defensive end, Peyton Turner, and I just had to suddenly change gears and avoid saying what the fuck on the thing, and I said, okay, so this has got to be a move because they feel that Cam Jordan is a declining player and they're getting him in to groom behind Jordan. And which the Carolina Panthers fans on there were like, that's great because I'm tired of seeing Cam Jordan. I'm ready for him to retire. So it was rather amusing. Um, you know, I thought I was looking at him as cornerback too. So I looked at him as a guy who was going to be that second guy.
Hmm.
Um, I thought he would play more like Taylor did this past season,
Yeah.
and I'm glad we didn't take him.
Oh yeah.
Because he is a bum. But I just thought he had the size and the speed to be CB2, and really could handle man-to-man coverage. Um, if I had to do it over again, I would put Asante Samuel ahead of him.
Yeah,
Uh,
in a heartbeat, or draft
yeah,
Elijah Moore. And I'm with you. I remember that year. It was Elijah Moore, and there was another receiver that ended up going in the second round. Either one, certainly would have been happy with where in the slot where they picked Peyton Turner. But Calvin, that's a prime example. There was a lot of people that felt that Tyson Campbell was going to be a solid NFL player, not an elite cornerback, but certainly,
yeah,
like Alan just said, somebody that could fill in at number two. He's a taller guy that would have been able, it looked like he was going to be able to handle the physical wideouts. He had 4.3 speed. He came from a big program, from a big time conference. Checked off all of those boxes. But again, that shows that the draft is certainly not an exact science, let alone for people who do not get paid specifically to scout these players and have their job status hinge on good picks and bad picks.
yeah, exactly. I just didn't see okay, so let's just take it to this year now. There is talk that the Saints could go for another cornerback in the first round this year. To me, that's kind of like the Peyton Turner decision from 2 years ago. Is it a need? No. Is it a want? Yeah, because you really have three outside guys. You don't
Yeah.
have an inside corner any longer. So, Roby can play, but Roby is getting older and older, and I thought he was showing his age last season.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand the desire for a cornerback, but to me, you're taking a position that you're pretty deep on right now, and you're burning a first-round pick. Where does Adebo and Taylor go from there if you take a first-round pick? Because I can't see drafting a first-rounder and saying, okay, you're going to be the nickel guy this year with the idea you're going to eventually play outside. Why did you draft those other two guys then? I just don't see that right now. And I think that defensive end is a far greater need, and so is defensive tackle. So I would stay more into that realm and stay away from cornerbacks until possibly day three. I think cornerbacks are deep enough. You can do that on day three.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Defensive line in general, tackle or end, a true defensive end. Not a 240, 235, 240 pound outside linebacker that some people want to draft. That doesn't fit the Saints system. You have to realize that the system that some of these players are going to, folks. But defensive line, tackle, or end would be a need over cornerback. Interior offensive line would be a need over cornerback. I could even make the argument, depending on what type of receiver, can even make an argument for a wideout over cornerback. And it's clear that the team likes Alontae Taylor. It also became somewhat apparent to me that I'm not going to say soured on Paulson Adebo, but he had a very frustrating year last year. At Marshawn, I'm not worried about the injury being a long-term issue, and they just signed him to an extension, so they're kind of locked up with him. If you draft a cornerback in the first round, and I agree with you, Alan, the top cornerbacks are going to go early. If one falls, and you see the defensive lineman that you want to target in the first round start to go earlier than you want, then maybe you make that move and try to swing a trade to get some picks back for either Taylor or a Debo. That's how you shuffle that deck. But if things play out how we think that they're going to play out through the first round, I can't see the Saints drafting a cornerback before even early on day 3. A guy that they can develop. It'll be a guy that specializes in slot coverage, an athletic guy that's going to contribute on special teams, but I can't see it being early.
Yeah, I would be worried if we cornerback early, at 29 or whatever, because they couldn't trade up to get the guys they really wanted. So we've talked about this a little bit last week, and Bijan Robinson's the only guy in the first round that I would take. I'm worried he goes to the Falcons at 8. I think if he does any kind of slide, I expect him to go in the top 10. But if he doesn't, I expect him to slide into the low teens, early 20s, because teams like Dallas, to a certain extent, Jacksonville, because even though they got Travis Etienne, having a bull rusher would be huge for that team. The Chargers, Seattle, all those teams in the 20s, I could see them going after Robinson. But I would that's the kind of guy I would like to see the Saints go up and go get if they went with a running back. But I think they should stick to their plan. I think they're going to get a defensive end, not a defensive tackle. But the other rumor that has been going on is the Saints are heavily investigating the Pittsburgh defensive tackle, Clancy. I hope this is all smoke. I'm really hoping that this is just smoke, because under Peyton, when you start hearing a name really associated with the team, that guy ends up being the guy they end up drafting.
Yeah,
because Peyton was very transparent. It sounded like smoke, it looked like smoke, but it turned out no, that's what Peyton was actually going to do. How do you feel about Kendrick Clancy? Kendrick Clancy, I'm sorry, that's not who he is. Elijah. Kendrick Clancy is an old defensive tackle for the Saints.
Right.
Elijah Clancy. How do you feel about him as a possible pick at 29?
I'll be honest with you. I don't like it. I think Clancy's a hell of a player, but I think he's limited in what he can bring to an NFL defense. He's extremely explosive and disruptive on the inside, but he's light. And a lot of critics are pointing to his short arms in addition to his lighter frame. I'm not going to pass up a guy just because his arms might be 2 inches shorter than the next guy, but it's the combination of the shorter arms and the lighter frame. When Clancy struggled at Pitt, it's because he had a difficult time disengaging from blockers that got a hold of him. And in theory, since the Saints brought in Saunders and Shepard, two 310, 315-pound athletic guys, whatever other tackles they bring in, they plan on a rotation, as you often do, especially at that spot. So I think Clancy could be a productive part of a rotation, especially in obvious passing situations, and third down packages. But you don't spend a first-round pick on a guy that's going to be a specialist. That's my philosophy as I go into these drafts, and I look at it this way too. The Saints ranked this. Forget ranking. The Saints were just downright abysmal against the run last year. 90% of that reason, 90+% of that reason was because the defensive tackles were getting blown off the ball. And again, Shepard and Saunders in theory are going to upgrade that, but you still need to add bulk in the middle. Bulk that's not going to be moved off the point. Bulk that's going to tie up blockers, get pushed into that backfield, alter a back's path, get in a quarterback's face. If the Saints draft Cansey at 29 or trade up to get him, then they are they are, in my opinion, they almost have to double down on the defensive tackle spot later in the draft, and get some bulk for that, for the middle, specifically the run defense. A guy like Benton from Wisconsin, Ika from Baylor, Brooks from Bowling Green, a 300-pound something guy that will be available. Should be available late in day 3, early in day 4. So if you draft Cansey, you're essentially telling us that you probably are going to use 2 picks on defensive tackle. And just in my opinion, if a value is there on day 3, great, because that's what day 3 picks are for, are value. But otherwise, you need all 3 of those first, second, third round picks, whatever movement you get from them. You need them to be instant, every down contributors, and I don't see that out of Cansey.
Yeah. John, I would be surprised. Definitely show that Payne is no longer in the building if we trade back. And I would be happy the draft did not fall the way the Saints want the draft to fall. It means 5 picks going in the first 15 picks.
Yeah.
If the quarterbacks all start sliding, then and they start taking defensive ends, defensive tackles early in the draft, then I would expect the Saints to trade back. But to me, I think Loomis and Payton, this is where they were simpatico. That they both believed in, if there's a guy that you like and you think you can go get him, burn assets to go get him.
Yeah.
Because you do not want to take the risk of not getting that guy.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm okay with that philosophy. Because again, screw what our draft boards are. The New Orleans Saints don't care what Alan Ulrich's draft board is, what Bob Rose's draft board is, and what none of your draft boards are. If you see a player, like you said, and Payton, Loomis, Ireland, they all have this philosophy. If you see a player that you believe will fit your system and be instant contributors, then who cares what round they are projected to go in? You take him when you can get him. I mean, obviously within realistic circumstances. If a guy is going to be a day 3 pick, then it's absolutely insane to draft him in day 1. That's that sort of thing. But otherwise, I mean, that's why we see so many, and not just from the Saints, but from other teams. So and so had this guy projected for the 3rd round. Well, okay, well, you like him. I'm going to take him in the 1st because I don't want somebody else to get him. So I don't mind that philosophy at all.
Well, it's funny because speaking of great draft classes, the 74 Steelers draft, they wanted to take John Stallworth in the 1st round.
Yeah.
And back then, there wasn't the scouting combine. There wasn't all the things that happened today. You were relying on, especially for a small school like Alabama A&M, which is where Stallworth came from. Was it not A&I? I think it was Alabama A&I. But regardless,
now you have me one, but it was one of them. Yeah,
it was an HBCU school.
Yeah.
So there was only a little bit of film on him. There wasn't great film on him because, frankly, they didn't scout the pro. They didn't scout those schools as closely as they did later on, which is partially how the AFL got built. And it really, you saw the attitudes change about black players and players from predominantly black schools like HBCUs, just start pulling that great talent from them, because back then they tended to gravitate to the big schools, the Big Ten schools, the California schools. Those were you got your linemen at Nebraska. That's where the linemen came from, because they were fed, the big wheat, farmer kids were at Nebraska. So that's what you wanted your offensive linemen to come from. You got your linebackers from Penn State, because those were the big stocky kids. Paterno cranked out great linebackers, that kind of thing. So I think, so the thing with Stallworth was the Steelers held on to that film for a long time
Hmm.
and wouldn't share it with teams. And you were supposed to only look at it for so long, then pass it to the next team. And they were terrified that someone else is going to start looking at this and take Stallworth.
Yeah.
So when they finally did pass it along to other teams, it was really too close to the draft. Their boards were pretty much set. They didn't really look at the film very closely. And Chuck Noll wanted to take him in the first round. Well, they took Lynn Swann in the first round instead. Again, a big school, USC. Then they took Jack Lambert in the second round, and he wanted, from Kent State, a linebacker from Kent State who was 6'5", weighed 218 pounds, looked long and lanky. And their pro day with him was watching him tackle in a gravel parking
Yep.
lot, pick gravel out of his skin, but yeah, so they waited to the fourth round to draft Stallworth, and it's the opposite of Sean Payton. Sean Payton not only would have taken Stallworth in the first round, Sean Payton probably trades up to get Stallworth, and yeah, it's a great pick, but you burnt assets. You probably don't get Mike Webster for that, So it's just funny how the game has evolved and the draft process has evolved the way it did. So let me ask you this, because I feel the same way about Cansey. I think I like him, but he's a boom or bust kind of guy.
Yes.
He's a guy that the short arms make a big deal, because if he can't get that extension to get an offensive lineman off of him and get under his pads to push and get him out the way before the offensive lineman gets his hands on him, that he's going to have to rely on his speed and his quickness and the explosion off the ball to get past that lineman and keep him from, I even joked on Twitter, I said he's going to have a Jim Burt jersey to keep him from grabbing him. And for those of you who don't remember who Jim Burt was the defensive tackle for the New York Giants in the 80s. And he famously wore his jersey so tight, it was number 64, and it looked like the 6 was under this armpit and the 4 was under this armpit, because offensive linemen had nothing to grab. Their hands would just slide right off those old jerseys because he wore it that tightly. So I think he would have to wear something like that. Yeah, I feel the same way. Too many Aaron Donald comparisons to me, for me as well. The Falcons took Andre Bruce in the first round back in, I think, 89, 88, because he was supposed to be the next Lawrence Taylor. That was his reputation. He had that kind of production in college. He was a big, rangy linebacker with incredible speed. Well, he wasn't the next Lawrence Taylor. He actually turned out to be a huge bust. They even tried him at tight end to see if they could salvage something out of his career. He was most famous for, I think, he and another guy shot BBs at a pizza delivery guy. Or something like that. Yeah, that was his most famous play as a Falcon. Was something he did. So who would you like them to take then in the first round?
There are a lot of guys. And again, I wouldn't, I'm like you, I'm not necessarily against the Cansey pick, but to me, that doesn't fully address the need that they have at defensive tackle. So you almost have to double down. If you're hell bent on addressing defensive tackle in the first round, and this is who I picked, with my second and final mock draft that I published today. I love Mozzie Smith from Michigan. Mozzie goes about 315, 320. He's going to check off that run stuffer box first, and he has the upside to develop as a pass rusher. To me, I see a guy like that. I love Siaki Ika, and in the second or third round, Benton from Wisconsin. Those are the kind of defensive tackles that I want. The type of a Malcolm Brown type of player that's only especially Mozzie. Smith has more athleticism, which is why I like his potential development as a pass rusher. But
Mm-hmm.
while he develops as an interior pass rusher, he's going to be able to go to. He has such power that he's going to be able to beat a lot of linemen with just a simple forklift move as a pass rusher, and most importantly, he's going to shore up that run defense. But to me, and I've mentioned this many times, defensive tackle, in my opinion, looks deeper in this draft than what a true defensive end does. So I would rather see the Saints address the defensive end spot first if the players that they like are on the board. And this is who I had in my first round mock draft was Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. A lot of people are saying he's going to be a second, third round pick, and that's probably accurate. Miles Murphy from Clemson could be a kid that's available. Kid from Northwestern who fits the Saints athletic profile at defensive end to a T. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his name unless they draft him, and then I'll have to learn it. So I'll just call him AA.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously it always depends on how the draft board plays out. But all other things being equal, I would rather see them address a defensive end first, and then double back and get a defensive tackle, that can tie up blockers and plug up that run defense later on.
So Calvin's question: do you think that it's possible that them to go defensive tackle back to back, Macy Smith, and then come back and get Ika at 40?
I doubt it, Calvin. If they grab Cansey in the first, then I can totally see them doubling back and grabbing a Benton or Ika later, because again, Cansey, in my opinion, only checks off one of those needs at defensive tackle. To double down with Mozzie and then another big body later on in day two, that seems counterproductive to the signings of Saunders and Shepard that you brought in. A different story if an Ika or somebody else falls to day three, because again, you're only looking at value at that point. But I can't see them. I can't see them going big body defensive tackle back to back.
I'm gonna mispronounce this guy's last name only because it's very close to a certain quarterback. But Brian Breesy from Clemson is a guy I've tried several times in mock drafts to grab him, and it's very difficult to get him because of the way they have that board stacked. He just disappears. He either disappears in the top 10 or he makes it the teens and nobody wants to trade with me to go get him. Not unless I give away the farm, to get up there, to get that high. And I'm talking about, around picks 12, 11, 13, somewhere around there. But he's a guy I like a lot.
Yeah.
I think he is a prototypical defensive tackle for a team like the Saints that likes big guys. He's 6'5", 300 plus pounds. Long, rangy guy, long arms. This is why I just can't see coming in, because the Saints put such an emphasis on height, and he's only 6 feet tall, and he has shorter arms, and he's light. He's not like some people want to compare him to, say, Cortez Kennedy. Well, Cortez Kennedy was 310, and he was 6'3". And he had short arms, but he was such a size. It was like trying to push a fire plug. I mean, it really was. You had a hard time getting your hands around him. So I don't see him being that kind of fit. Whereas I look at a guy like Brian Breesy, and I'm like, this guy checks every box for the Saints, including somebody who's injured. I mean, if you be cynical, picking a guy, okay, he's coming off a torn ACL, bingo, we'll take this guy. A guy with bad back problems, absolutely, we want this guy on the team. But as far as his physical ability, I just really think he fits what this team wants to do. My only concern is to go get him, that the Saints are going to trade up and burn at least that third round pick, if not a future asset in 2024, to get up high enough to grab him. So you mentioned defensive ends because you feel defensive tackle is deep enough that you can go grab a guy like is it Ika or Ika?
It's Ika. I'm pretty
It's
sure
Ika.
it's Siake
Okay.
Ika.
Okay. So Ika, you probably can get him in the second round.
Mhm.
So let's say, for example, because I think he'll be there at 40. Um, let's say the first round you go get that defensive end. I know you like Kean White from Georgia Tech.
I do.
Who else do you like in the first round as far as defensive ends?
I mentioned Foskey, and
Mhm.
he's a guy that a lot of projections have going in the second round, but he's also the type of fits the athletic profile. I'll be honest, and I hate making comparisons, but it's natural to do. Watching Foskey's style of play and his demeanor on the field, he reminds you a lot of Cam Jordan. And Cam, what he goes a tick or two shy at 290 now. He was closer to 270 when he came into the league. And that's about what Foskey is now, 265, 270 range, but a taller guy. Plays strong, but has a dynamic first step. Keon White, Calvin, I think you're the one that made the comment. I see why some people are hesitant on him because he's raw. That's why, frankly, that's why I would avoid a guy like Keon White in the first round, because you had raw with Marcus Davenport, you had raw with Peyton Turner. You need a guy that's going to hit and going to hit now. Miles Murphy from Clemson, I'm not as high on him as other people are. Because in my opinion, he flashes some great ability on tape, but he's not real consistent. And I don't like inconsistent performers, especially at that position. The Northwestern kid is a guy, again, projected. A lot of projections have him going in the second round. I would not mind a slight reach at all, to see them grab him in the first. Outside of that, and in my mock today, I had them, drafting in the second round the defensive end from Kansas State, Felix Uzoma. I think it's a bit too much of a stretch to grab Uzoma in the first round. So really the Northwestern kid, Miles Murphy, Foskey, those are the three true defensive ends that I would take a first round pick on, which goes back to what I was saying before. I don't like the depth at edge is okay. But the top guys are all guys that are either too light for the Saints 4-man scheme, or just guys that have too many questions in their game.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say one of the things that bothers me about a lot of defensive ends and why I would take a defensive end in the first round or move up to go get this guy as opposed to defensive tackle is because there's so many tweeners out there. You can't go to a true 3-4. In fact, nobody plays, except for maybe the Steelers, plays a true 3-4.
Right.
But you've got so many of these tweeners out there who are too light to be a hands in the dirt defensive end. And they are not quite quick enough to be a stand-up linebacker, especially, and they struggle on dropping on pass coverage.
Zach Bond.
Yeah. So you have a Zach Bond. Well, I was thinking more like a Junior Gillette. You've got a lot of Junior Gillette type build players out there now. And it's because of the spread offense.
Yeah.
And the way they do defenses today. That to me, I just start looking at height and weight when I start whittling down who I like. And
Van Ness, and I know you love him. Van Ness from Iowa is another kid. And frankly, I'd move up for Van Ness.
I would too. I managed to snag him at 29 only in one mock draft, and it was a draft that had to fall perfectly. And I tried trading up a couple of times to grab him, and he just kept sliding. They reject my trades, and he kept sliding. So I was able to get him at 29. But I mean, 6'5", 275. That is what the Saints like in their defensive ends. A guy with great bend. And how did we start this show? We started this show talking about the ability to play the run.
Mm-hmm.
And Davenport, for all his negativity about his injuries and stuff, there was never a question about Davenport's ability to play the run. That's why the Saints kept him over Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
Was because he had the size to play the run and the speed to go sideline to sideline and stretch the play out and seal off that edge. If you watch, and this is not a knock on Cam Jordan, because Cam Jordan clearly is the best defensive end in Saints history, but Cam Jordan at his age now struggles to play the outside run. If he reads it well, he gets himself in a position to make up for his lack of speed because he's an older player. But if he charges upfield and that running back sneaks out behind him, he does not have the speed to turn around and run that play down anymore. So they're going to want a kid who's got that size, speed. They're looking for another Cam Jordan, They're looking for a guy who can play that kind of play, that position. And I think Van Ness has got the tools to play that. So that's a guy I'd like to see them move up. In fact, I would be so excited if they traded up and I heard his name get called on Thursday night. I would be like, that's it. I'm great. And then we'll take, hopefully Maisie Smith falls to 40. I'll take Smith at 40 and I'm done. I'm done, son. That's what we wanted. I mean, we got 2 starters right now.
Yeah.
Clearly we got other needs. We need a running back. We need a tight end. I know that, but I mean, that would be my ideal draft in the first 2 rounds to get those kind of players. Because the Georgia kids all flash big warning signs to me because you go back to Jalen
Carter.
Thank you. I kept wanting to say Jalen Mills. I knew that wasn't right. Jalen Carter, his whole attitude, the fact that he put on all this weight, he's Albert Haynesworth after Haynesworth got paid by the Redskins.
Yeah.
That's what that screams at me. And I'm like, I don't need that. We don't need a guy like that. Some of the other players from Georgia, I'm like, I don't know about this kid. Georgia, it's Kirby Smith is a great coach, a great recruiter, but their defense was the sum of its parts.
Yes,
the individual parts are not great players. They fit well together, and his scheme was built around getting those kind of players to fit in those slots, and the scheme won. So it's hard for me to embrace those guys. I see other names get thrown around and stuff like that. I do like Felix from Kansas State. I feel like that's a guy that you might want to look at in the second or third round.
Yeah.
If he lasts that long. Third round be very tough. I don't think he'll last to 71. Yeah, I know. The problem with Trey Hendrickson, ironically, Trey Hendrickson had problems with being undersized as a defensive end. And he managed to compensate for that with explosion and skill. He really took that coaching to heart. That is probably if I'm the Saints, well, he's now the Falcons defense coordinator, but I'm the Saints former defensive line coach, and I want to get my players to buy into my scheme. I would put Trey Hendrickson up. I'd run his film from his rookie year and his film in Cincinnati in his last year of the Saints. I said, look what this kid has done, embracing my coaching. And this is what you could be.
Him and Granderson, because Granderson has developed into a very, very good player too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I just want to point out Hendrickson got paid, so he got his money. Let's say that the Saints' worst nightmare comes to pass, and the top defensive end, top tackles come off the board, and now you're debating whether to take a cornerback or a linebacker or an inside defensive offensive lineman. Although that would probably be the least sexy pick of them all. We've talked about linebacker. Is there a linebacker that you really like in the first round you would want to go get?
No, no, absolutely not.
That's a quick answer.
There are a few linebackers that I really do like in this draft, starting with
Mhm.
Dorian Williams from from Tulane, and yeah, I have Dorian as far as off-ball linebackers go, a guy that can cover, play the run, although he is light, a guy that can do the types of things that the Mario Davis and Pete Werner can do for my defense. Dorian Williams is my top linebacker, and I know I'm not playing homer. I got no stake in Louisiana schools or anything like that. That's just how I feel about this linebacker class. Trenton Simpson, Jack from Clemson, Jack Campbell from Iowa. Those are guys that could sneak their way into late in the first round. Will probably be day 2 picks, if not. Definitely be day 2 picks, if not. But if I'm the Saints, I don't spend a first round pick on them. I don't think that they are that. I'm not going to call them a home run pick. I don't think that they are that guaranteed to become a defense's top playmaker or even a top playmaker for a linebacking unit. And if I'm going to draft a linebacker that high, that's the type of player that it has to be. And I don't see that, not even out of Simpson or Campbell. And another kid, escapes my name, but I hated his film, the kid from Arkansas. I don't see any of those guys being worth, and for my value, an early second round pick, let alone a first round pick.
Well, it's funny. You mentioned we talked about the Georgia players, and Nolan Smith immediately came to mind, and that's why I didn't say it at the time. Nolan Smith is a prototypical player that I said is the sum of the parts. I think if you get him out of that Georgia defense, you probably can get a pretty good Sam linebacker, strong side guy. But I think, his intelligence is good, but his playmaking ability is very limited, especially
Yeah,
in the
I don't
first
want him in
round.
space. I don't want him in coverage.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why the Saints, that's what the Saints need their linebackers to do.
Well, and so the guy I do like, and I'm looking at 29, is very close to the second round, is Trenton Simpson. I'm very nervous about taking a Clemson linebacker because
Always.
Stephon Anthony has so scarred me. But Simpson fits what we were just talking about
Mhm.
a guy who can play in space, a guy who's got a great motor. He seems to have a higher football IQ than Stephon Anthony, but he's undersized. He's 6'3", 230, so he's a weak side linebacker. He's really the guy you're going to groom behind Demario Davis. He's not really that strong side guy, so you take him in the first round, he's probably not going to play very much.
Right.
So you're not going to get that impact player that you need right away. So, if Simpson was taller, I probably, he was closer to 6'4", 6'5". I probably more tempted to go get him in the first round because I could figure out ways to get him involved in the game. But and it's probably the number 22 that does it for me. He looks like a damn defensive back or a safety or, even a running back to an extent playing out there. The way he moves on the field and everything, it's very safety-like.
Mhm.
6'3", 230, that's pretty good safety.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tall for a safety. 6'1" is probably about where you want to be at safety, but yeah, he looks like a safety out there. So being able to translate that into playing linebacker, especially with the Saints like to have their linebackers flow defensive and seal edges and so forth. I just don't see he's got enough. We used to call it you don't have enough ass to push that stuff around.
Yeah.
He doesn't have enough ass to push a lawnmower. Doesn't have enough ass to go and get in there and really, impact a guy,
Hmm.
make that big hit.
And
So yeah, I
Clemson,
mean,
for the same reasons you said about Georgia, Clemson defensive players always make me nervous for that exact same reason. And what
yeah.
you just said about Simpson, I know we talked about Barisi, we talked about Murphy, and now we're talking about Simpson. They're all good players, but you just hit the nail on the head when you said I'll have to figure out ways to use him. I don't
Hmm.
want to have to figure out anything with my first round pick. I want my first round pick to be able to cause opposing coaches to figure out their game plans around him.
Yeah.
And because of that, and everything you just said about Simpson, he's a less athletic. Oh God, what was the guy's name that the Cardinals drafted real high a couple years ago? Uh, Isaiah something.
Um,
He had a
oh,
pick against the
oh,
Saints.
yeah, yeah. I know who you're talking about. Man, let me see if they even mention him. Um,
But I mean, yeah, he
Isaiah.
was the kid that came out, got drafted high,
Yeah.
because of some great college numbers and off the chart athleticism. But the
Hmm.
Cardinals haven't been able to, again, it's this phrase, figure out a way to use him. I want a
Yeah.
guy that I can plug in any kind of system. Obviously they're going to be more productive in some systems than others. But my first round pick better be a guy that that football teams plan around, not that I have to plan my football team around.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the guy who checks the physical boxes, Noah Sewell from Oregon, 6'3", 250. He checks the boxes, but he's stiff.
Yeah, can't cover.
He is not. Yeah. So you're going to be drafting a guy, and he's really a third round, fourth round pick. But you'll be drafting a guy who really he's a two down linebacker.
Mhm.
Because like you said, he can't cover. He doesn't move well. If you get him in a misdirection, he doesn't have that closing speed to make up the difference. So if you could almost take Noah Sewell and Simpson and combine the two,
Right.
you'd have a great linebacker, but you don't have that one player who just dominates. Even the Alabama kids, I just don't see. Well, yeah, they are small because they're built on speed, and
Hmm.
that's Clemson's a speed team, um, and that's how they get you. That's how they play in college. Is it's all about speed and everyone hustling to the ball. So once again, you're the sum of your parts. That's why they were a lot of problems for Alabama, because Alabama is a bigger, slower team. So the Clemson defense would just gang tackle everybody, So thank you, Isaiah Simmons. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Jimmy Gumbo. I'm usually good about those things. I have to look them up sometimes, but
You,
yeah,
you and I get
he is.
punchy this time of year, so it's okay.
Well, some of these players' names sort of fall into similar names from the past. And that's what happens with me. I start calling up like Clancy. I start calling Clancy and everything else. So I'm digging out play. I'm almost as bad as Ralph Marlboro. Uh, um, so let's look at offensive players then, to kind of close it out. Well, there's two things I want to look at. First off, LSU players. I mean, we talk about Tulane players. Obviously, we have two Tulane players we like, the linebacker and Tajay Spears, but neither one in the first round.
No,
LSU players. The Saints have never taken an LSU player in the first round. Does that streak continue?
absolutely.
Yeah, I think so too.
Absolutely. This particular year, it has nothing to do with an LSU bias or
Mhm.
anti-LSU bias. It's because there are not that many. There are no terrific LSU players in this draft.
Yeah.
A couple. Yeah. If you're gonna actually absolutely put a pistol to my head and force me to choose an LSU player in this draft, I'm going to begrudgingly say, I'll take Jacqueline Roy in the third round. Because he could be a run stuffing defensive tackle. If you put a gun to my head and say you have to, you take this bullet or you take Keyshawn Boot, I'm going to take the bullet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a couple defensive backs, where LSU is usually very, very good at churning out. They don't stand out to me. I think LSU fans, you're going to be very disappointed in this year's draft results.
Yeah, the guy I would take in the first round is still on the Tigers team at
Yeah.
safety that they have. That's the guy I'm watching because he's clearly a playmaker. He is a difference maker when he's out there in the field. So when that guy comes out in the draft, he's going to be, if he keeps growing the way he is, you're looking at a guy who's going to be a top 10 player. And
Easy.
it's funny to mention the Honey Badger because he is everything the Honey Badger was not. He's a big physical kid, a hard hitter, and he has the speed to make the difference. The Honey Badger was just a playmaker for LSU, and he had the intelligence to put himself in position, football intelligence to put himself in position to make plays. Yeah, so I don't see any LSU players that are really going to make. There's a couple guys I have sliding late day 3. I think an offensive lineman for LSU. I think I had in the 7th round. The Saints taking a flyer on him. But as far as LSU players, I just don't see any impact players coming in this draft. So offensive players in the first round. Let's look at the skill positions first. We talked a little bit about running back off the air, and we both like Bijan Robinson, but I'll be surprised if he makes it close enough for the Saints even to trade up for him. Any running backs you see that you would take in the first round outside of Robinson?
I wouldn't. And there's a few 3 or 4 running backs that I absolutely love in this draft. But again, I think that they'll be available maybe even as late in the second round. But a few of them will be even probably into early day 3. No, Calvin.
I was getting ready to say this, Calvin. Second round, I would take the second. If he was my highest rated player on the board, I would take him in the second.
Yeah, I would too. And other than that, I love Charbonnet. I love Zach Abanikanda from Pitt. Chase Brown from Illinois. Tajay Spears. But all of those guys, you could start. You don't really need to start looking at until midway through the second round, including Gibbs. I would throw Gibbs in that category too. So no, I wouldn't touch a running back in the first round unless Robinson either falls to me or I have to give up very, very little to go up and get him.
So tight ends, we've talked about this plenty of times, how they have little impact their first year in the league. That said, are there any tight ends that you would take in the first round in this draft?
I'll tell you, Michael Mayer from Notre Dame is a guy that's hard to overlook when you watch his film. I know people are going to talk about Kincaid from Utah, and our John Hendricks at Saints News Network. That's his man crush. Kincaid is going to give me very little as an inline tight end, and that's including as a receiver. Plus, he comes with some medical questions that concern me a little bit. If it's me, I don't take a first-round tight end. But again, if you put that gun to my head and force me to, I know you love Darnell Washington, and I understand why. But I don't go him in the first round. If I have to pick one, I'd begrudgingly go Michael Mayer from Notre Dame.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, and that's given my scars from Irv Smith versus Wesley Walls back in the 90s, Irv Smith was also Notre Dame tight end.
Yeah.
I am not sold on a first round tight end. Second round, yes. Second and third round, especially third round, I'm knocking people over to go get that guy.
Yeah.
If he's there. Darnell Washington, like I said, I look at him as a third offensive tackle who can catch passes.
He's
I don't know if he
underrated
can
as a
ever become a
receiver.
Mark. Yeah, I don't know if he could become a Mark Bavaro type of tight end. It would be great if he did, but right now, you want to run the football. I'm getting a guy like Washington in the second round just because I think he's a much better blocker than Troutman, and I
Yeah.
think he has a higher upside than Troutman. Juwan Johnson's going to be a guy you use. You line up outside the numbers. You use him as a big receiver. But Washington is a guy you could probably go to in the middle of the field and in the red zone. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm not taking him in the first. I'm probably the earliest I'm taking him is at 40, and that's only if he's still the highest rated player on my board.
Yeah.
And that's purely as a tight end. So that leaves receiver. Um, and then we'll talk about offensive linemen because offensive linemen are about as sexy as talking about trailer hitches on the back of a car. But uh, I'm look, yeah, exactly, Calvin. That's why I was saying a Bavaro kind of guy. That's where Bavaro made his living, was the seam route. I'm thinking about that highlight of it seemed like every 49ers player is taking a shot at him, and you got uh, Ronnie Lott hanging on him. It was a Monday night game, and he's just fighting through it for more yardage. That's the kind of tight end I'd like to see us get,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if he's able. But receivers, Quentin Johnson fits that pro Michael Thomas kind of receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't need a burner guy, a big who can go out there and get those third down catches, be the red zone target, take the shots over the middle. So who do you like in that first round?
Quentin Johnson is a heck of a receiver, but I'll tell you, as far as big body guys who also have the athleticism to get deep and make plays through the intermediate zones, I'll take Cedric Tillman from Tennessee or A.T. Perry from Wake Forest over Quentin. I wouldn't take either one of those guys in the first round. I'd take them in the second or third, where I've had Tillman in one mock and had Perry in another mock. But if Quentin Johnston drops, it would be tough to pass him up. I think if my top defensive linemen were gone at 29 and Quentin Johnston were there for the taking, I do think that I take Johnston and then regroup in day two for the trenches. But I don't take Johnston over any defensive lineman that would still be potentially available.
And that's actually kind of an advantage for what the Saints are looking for, because I think that you're going to see the Josh Downs, the JSN from Ohio State, the Tay Flowers, and I cannot think of the other guy from Tennessee, Jalen Hyatt. I think those are the guys that people are going to gravitate to right away. They're going to take those guys early, get them in the first, and you really want a lot of these guys go in the first round because that helps the Saints. But going to go get those kind of guys because everyone falls in love with that speed guy, that guy who takes the top off of a defense, that gives a guy like Quentin Johnson could possibly slide down. Opens things up for the physical receivers like Cedric Tillman and so forth. Cedric Tillman's a funny pick in the draft because it's too high to take him at 40, but he'll never make it to 71.
Right. That's one of those players where, and even in the first round, if all your defensive linemen are gone, I'd scratch my head a little bit over Cedric Tillman at 29 or A.T. Perry at 40. But I would understand the logic. And like you said, even at 40 might be a little bit too early for Tillman. But again, you look at who was his coach in 2021 at Tennessee. Cody Burns, now with the New Orleans Saints. So, usually where there's smoke, there's fire in these instances. I'm not saying Tillman would go or should go at 29. I'm just saying if you're looking for a surprise, that could be one.
Yeah. Yeah. Val Davis was around. I could see him taking that speed receiver and going to get, Hyatt's a one trick pony. But yeah,
Yeah.
going to go grab a guy like Hyatt because he's been looking forever for that next Clifford branch. Um, so Hyatt running as fast as he does in a straight line, that's exactly what he would want.
Yeah.
So you want guys who had a lot of Al Davis in them, who are looking for speed guys to allow a guy like Tillman to fall. And that actually 40 is a spot I would like to trade back and try and recoup maybe another third round pick, maybe two fourth rounders, because that's where I could see a lot of that kind of the middle of that draft, that 50 to 75 or 80 range.
Mm-hmm.
If you have multiple picks in that area, there's a lot of players who fit in that grouping
Yeah.
that would go there. And that's where I really like a lot of the talent, especially at receiver. Um, Offensive lineman, the famous saying is everyone wants a highly drafted offensive line. Nobody wants to do the draft to get those guys.
Yeah.
Um, so who do you like in the offensive line in the first round that's an interior lineman or maybe a tackle that's going to get kicked into the inside?
There are three guys, and I'll start with Darnell Wright from Tennessee, who a lot of people are projecting at tackle. I think he could play guard just as easily. I also think he's going to be gone before 29, but that's a name to watch. And another that will probably be gone before 29 and considered the highest graded pure interior lineman is Osiris Torrance from Florida.
UL. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Yeah, he came from UL. He did the transfer portal and followed Coach Napier to Florida. But yeah.
He's a good player. Another player I love, and I wrote about him today. If you're looking for a surprise name in the first round, is guard from TCU, Steve Avila. Steve has played. Steve has been a starting center. He's been a starting guard. He's been a starting tackle. He won't be a tackle in the pros, but you want to talk about a pile mover as a run blocker and a very technically sound, big-bodied pass blocker. That's going to be your long-term replacement for Andrus Peat if you want to shoot for him at 29.
That was exactly what I was going to bring up because Torrance, I think, will be gone. But Avila from TCU is a good target to watch to see if the Saints take him at 29. It's not a sexy pick, but for all the reasons you just said, tackle, guard, center, he is a guy that can play all three positions. So that's a huge checkbox for the Saints. I mean, we even talked about RAS scores and that stuff, which is always a check mark for the Saints, especially when you're looking. To me, RAS scores, I think, really stand out to help predict players. But really, when you start looking in day 2, day 3 picks, start looking at the RAS scores of the players that are left. Those are the guys that they're going to be looking at. But I think Steve Avila is somebody that really fits what they like to do as far as having multiple positions he can play. And they can put him in as a third tackle as a rookie. They can put him in as guard when Pete gets hurt, not if he gets hurt.
Right.
He can also play center if, for whatever reason, I can't believe I just drew a blank on his damn name. I've been too long in the Saints past. Forgive me, but the current Saints center.
Oh, McCoy,
McCoy, it's not Josh Hill. I mean, not Josh Hill. It's not John Hill. It's not Joel Hilgenberg. Not Jay Hilgenberg. It's none of those guys, But yeah, McCoy, who people like Nick Underhill still think he can play guard if he had to. I think he's really locked in at center. I think if there was going to be a chance that he was going to move over, they would have put Ruiz at center and put him at guard then. I think that experiment's over with. They like him at center. They're going to leave him at center. Ruiz at guard. I think Avila is somebody they look at that they can put there next to, and he's 6'4", 340. He is going to be a big body guy. They'd love to get him next to Penning and
Mhm.
become a left-handed team
Yep.
where they run behind the left side of that line, where you got two guys who are road graders and can get to that next level and beat the hell out of those linebackers.
And we both talked a couple weeks back about Dennis Allen wanting to go big and physical on offense.
Mhm.
So picture, Penning takes the left tackle spot. You draft Avila to take the left guard spot, and then you draft Darnell Washington with pick 40. Drop the mic.
Yeah. Yeah, you're looking at the Great Wall of New Orleans. You probably have to call it a levee. They just built a levee for Derek Carr. But yeah, you're looking at a wall of players, and that's what Allen wants to see, because he wants his offensive line to blow guys off the ball,
Mhm.
especially in short yardage. You saw how many times this past season that 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, if they don't run Taysom Hill, they can't pick it up.
Yeah.
Allen hates that because he's a defensive-minded coach. Defensive-minded coach, you got to think like Vince Lombardi. If you can't get a damn yard, you don't deserve to win the game. That's what they're going to want to get. They want to get an offensive line that just blows people off the ball and pushes that defense back and dominates the game. So, if that's where we're going with this and that's what we're going to build, you cannot go wrong with a Via.
Yeah.
I would love to get Cyrus Torrance over here. I would love to see him as a Saint. I just think that he is a guy that's going to be really high up there on people's draft boards. He's probably one of the first offensive linemen off the board.
Mhm.
I don't see the Saints trading up to go get him simply because too many teams are going to be targeting him.
Mhm.
They won't trade down to go and settle for another guy. That's somebody who's a pure inside guy. Offensive tackles. Do you see them going to get a tackle
I
this year?
don't. Not in the first round. It's why you drafted Penning last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand there are some concerns with Ryan Ramczyk's knee for the long term, but it's not a big enough concern to pick with a first or even a second round pick. If they draft a guy that played tackle in college in the first or second round, it's going to be because they project him inside at guard, like a Darnell Wright from Tennessee.
Yeah, exactly. That's my feeling too. I think if they're going to look at a replacement for Ryan Ramczyk, they're probably going to target that next year. They may take that. Doesn't prevent them from taking a tackle this year.
No,
but probably 3rd round, day 3 kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily a round 1 player, and chances are a small school player too, because that's just how they scout.
Yeah.
So before we get out of here, final prediction: who do you think the Saints take in the first round on Thursday night?
And yeah, I mean, we just spit out so many possibilities.
Oh, I know. I did that on purpose.
I know. I know, and we'll talk about it on the air too. Before the first round officially begins. I'm going to cheat and go 2 players, and I'll stay true to my 2 mock drafts. I'm going to go either Maisie Smith from Michigan, the defensive tackle, or a bit of a reach, and Isaiah Foskey, the defensive end from Notre Dame. I'm going to go one of those 2 players would be my prediction.
Well, Jerry, we really dissected poor Cansey. He doesn't stand a shot. I just really feel like there's a lot of smoke in that.
And again, I won't be mad. I won't be mad, but I can't see it. It goes against what Dennis Allen's draft and free agent signing philosophies have been so far.
Right. I'm leaning towards Van Ness in the first round. That's probably the one I feel strongest about, and I think they trade up to go get him. and I think we lose a third round pick as part of that, which will suck.
Yeah.
But what we just said earlier, that they go get the guy that
Mhm.
they really really like. If they really really like this guy, that's who they're going to go grab. And that's probably my fandom coming out. That's one of the pictures I go to sleep next to at night is that number 91. And yeah, some of it is I want to make up for losing Trey Hendrickson. He's wearing that number, and he's a white guy, so I can't say he's Smith. I can't say he's Smith, making up for that guy at 91. So, but to me, he just checks to me boxes. And then the other guy is he has to slide, he has to fall. But Brees from Clemson is my other guy. I kind of have a check mark next to, only because if his medicals are concerned, I can see him sliding and the
Yeah.
Saints again going up to go get him. The only thing I'm positive about is the Saints will trade up. They will trade up to go get somebody. I don't know how high they go, but I mean, there's certainties in life, death, taxes, and the Saints trading up in the first round.
This is true. This is true.
That's why I sit and watch the draft, and every time I see trade, I go, oh, here come the Saints. And it's like, oh no, they didn't take this one. So that would be a great draft. I would be very happy with that draft, Calvin.
Real.
That would make my night. I just I don't know if they'll be able to keep that third round pick, which is going to really suck because I think that's where you can get a good receiver, you can get that running back, you can get that linebacker that you really need. So if I'm going to burn a future asset, I'd rather burn I'd rather burn future assets, 2024 assets, not 2023 right now.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Calvin, and I agree with you. We said all this stuff about Clemson. I just feel like his size, 6'5", 300 pounds, really checks a lot of the boxes. And the injuries, I'm sorry, the injuries check a lot of boxes for the Saints too. All right, Bob. We talked about what's going to happen in the Bayou Blitz. Are you going to do your show tomorrow night, or are y'all going to skip it and go straight to the draft coverage on Thursday?
We are going to skip tomorrow night, and just have a 3-day show on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we're wimping out on you guys tomorrow night.
All right. Well, be sure and put down all the information to watch on Thursday night. I'm going to try. I should be able to make the show Thursday night. Friday night, no, but Thursday night I should be able to hop in. I'll try and pop in during the broadcast as best I can. I just don't know how far in I'll be able to get there, and hopefully, I don't expect the Saints to trade up to the top 10. Right. But I think in the teens, lower teens, I think that's where the Saints possibly could make a move. I'd rather them only go as high as 20 because that doesn't burn as many assets. Mm-hmm. But I know they're going to trade up. They're not picking at 29. So anyway, thank you guys for joining us. When it's draft, we're going to go way over time. Poor Bob, I'm keeping him up past his bedtime. But thank you guys for sticking with us tonight. And next week, we'll have the draft in the books. We're going to be talking about undrafted free agents they brought in. And who we think can make it, who is going to be the next Jesus, I'm drawing a blank on every single player on the Saints. It's because I've had my nose in the draft book so much. But the next the receiver, number 89, the undrafted free agent who is now going to be on Rashid Shaheed. Who will be the next Rashid Shaheed, and who will be the next Andy Tanner or Anime Ojo, although he was a drafted player. The undrafted superstar of camp that never seems to pan out. Smoke Monday was another one that everybody seemed to really love the signing of that guy. So We'll go through all that and recap the draft next time on Under the Dome. In the meantime, draft week. Good night, everybody.
Right.